All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here, talking real music in real time for a few real people out there just like you right there and like me right here. This particular episode brought to you by the band Hydra and their album Point Break from a couple of years back. The reason I'm promoting this is the band has a new album coming out in September called Rehydrated. Apparently, they got kicked off Frontiers. Something weird's going on with Frontiers music this year. Just not the same stuff coming my way from them, and they've kind of switched their focus. But Hydra, they re-signed with Pride and Joy Music, and they're having a great year. They're a record label that was barely on my radar last year, and this year I've bought like 5 or 6 things from them, and I'll probably purchase the new Hydra. If you like Toto, Journey, and a little dash of Europe, the band, right? No Asia, just Europe. Okay. So you could say there's no Kansas in this, there's no Boston in it, but there's a little bit of Europe. Okay. So check it out. If you haven't listened to Hydra, it's a great band, and I think you'll like it. Now, I want to cover this Joe Bonamassa story where he's blasting, again, he's blasting the Hall of Fame. Now, why is he doing that? Because of what happened with John Mayall. John Mayall, 90 years old, passes away, was nominated for some music appreciation award. Again, it wasn't even a full strength nomination into the Hall of Fame. Keep in mind, Dolly Parton got full honors at the Hall of Fame. Full honors. And again, people like Dolly as a person. Does she belong in the rock and roll? She didn't think so. She thought this was silly. And then she did a rock album. She made what? Lemons out of lemonade, supposedly. She made money, right? I don't have anything personally against Dolly Parton, but you're putting Dolly Parton in the Hall of Fame before Steppenwolf, before America, before Blue Oyster Cult, who I'm not a huge fan of, but when you look at influence, they keep talking about influence all the time, and they're saying this band influenced the next generation of bands. There's no Jim Croce, there's no Dan Fogelberg, there's no Poco. Who did Poco influence? Obviously the Eagles, right? They're not in the Hall of Fame. Oh my gosh, that's just stupid. But everyone's dead from Poco, I think, pretty much. Richie Furay, I think, is still around. So they could probably bring together people who were in Poco at one time and have Richie accept the award. But this is just, it's dumb. So Joe Bonamassa basically saying here what I've been saying, but doing it in a louder fashion. He talks about Chris Squire from Yes. Remember that? Chris passed away before Yes got inducted. Remember Ray Thomas from the Moody Blues? I like to talk about that one. He passed away just a few months prior to the Moody Blues being inducted in. And so this is just a pattern with the Hall of Fame. Joey B here is talking about Paul Rogers. Like, why hasn't Paul Rogers been put into the Hall of Fame? I would say put all of Bad Company, that original lineup. I'm a big Brian Howe fan, but I can acknowledge that maybe Brian doesn't get in. He's dead too, though, so he wouldn't be able to enjoy it. So Paul Rogers for sure, and there are others. Last week I spent time listening to the bands that aren't in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Little River Band, not even mentioned, not even like a little twinkle of a mention of LRB, one of the great bands from the 70s into the 80s. Anything that kind of touches George Martin, which LRB had one George Martin produced record, America had like 7. And you would think some of that George Martin mojo would be enough to say, hey, these guys are a great band. The guy who produced the Beatles got involved with them. So maybe we should consider putting them in. Jim Croce, who had about as much material as Nirvana had. was killed in a plane crash, didn't die from a drug overdose. Jim Croce didn't promote like the drug culture. He was a working class hero writing songs for the working class. And his life ended tragically. He was on top of the world, on top of the music world. And he was on his way, I think, from a gig or to a gig when that happened. Dan Fogelberg, they don't really like singer songwriter types, although I think James Taylor and Carly Simon are in, Carole King is in. So some of them are okay. But for whatever reason, Dan Fogelberg, yeah, he's not good enough. I mean, and there are many others. You have your own because I get messages all the time. Did you know so and so isn't in the Hall of Fame? And I'm just like, what? And I go look it up and just like, yeah, they're not in. I mean, look, the Hall of Fame seems to be kind of a corrupt organization. And now they're putting like hip hop, they're forcibly putting stuff in there that's uncomfortable. This is much like what they're doing. This is the same thing as turning on the Olympics and seeing, eye porn. And you're just like, no, I don't want to see this. And if you protest, people are like, oh, so you're not very open minded. Rock and roll can mean anything. It's the spirit of what it is. No, then change the name. Someone smartly said, then just change the name of the institution to the Anything Goes Music Hall of Fame. And then someone needs to come along and recreate the concept of a rock and roll Hall of Fame. Here's the problem for rock and roll. It's dying, if you haven't noticed. These bands that I'm talking about, if they've got members left, they're getting really old. Like the Little River Band, all those guys are in Australia. I think some of them or most of them are still alive. So yes, they could probably go to America. I don't know if they'd want to. I don't know if they'd want to after what America has done to them as far as their band and all the legal stuff that has transpired. America, those guys are still, a couple of those guys are still around, two main guys, although one of them, the late, great Dan Peake, is in here, but certainly they could accept an award from the Hall of Fame. And there are others, but it just goes on and on. Steppenwolf isn't in the Hall of Fame. I always mention them because they're complaining all the time about influence. Like Steppenwolf, they influenced bands like Blue Oyster Cult, okay, clearly, and a whole bunch of other things that came later. There's a huge list of things that you could say Steppenwolf, yeah, definitely influenced these guys. It doesn't make sense to me why. It's just arbitrary. And then they'll talk about like MC5. Aren't they going in this year finally? They're getting that musical excellence award, the same one they're giving John Mayall. And they complained MC5 needs to be in there, but all these other bands don't need to be in there, but MC5 for sure. So anyway, Joe Bonamassa. I don't know if he has any influence, but maybe the fact that he's complaining will draw attention to some of these bands that just aren't in the Hall of Fame yet. And will it fix anything? Yeah, probably not. I mean, it was cool to see Foreigner get in this year. There were a couple of good decisions this year, but there were a couple of just bonehead moves. And you'd have to do about 10 years of just going back and putting in people like Joe Cocker. Like, there's just so many people that Robert Palmer isn't in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I don't know if is Steve Winwood by himself in the Hall of Fame. I guess he's in there in a couple of other instances, but I mean, Phil Collins, Phil Collins, Phil, think of that. Phil Collins is not in the Hall of Fame as a solo artist. Holy crap, Batman. All right. So, see, when you start thinking through and naming names, it's ridiculous. So, I'm talking about this band Hydra today. They have a new album coming out in September. Once I get that, I will probably be holding it just like I'm holding this one, Point Break from a couple of years ago, Toto, Journey, a little bit of Europe. Whatever you want this to sound like, it sounds like that. So just go and listen to it. I think you'll enjoy it. Also, Patreon and YouTube members and buy me a coffee. I had a lot of people buying me coffees after my Bible reading, which I had never done, but I'm becoming very irritated at the culture, and I've kind of decided I'm not going to promote anything that's too dark musically. Some people just don't want to deal with secular music. I still love a lot of secular music, and most of the stuff I listen to is easy on the ears, and there's no weird stuff. There's no strange lyrics. There's no promoting any satanic elements in the stuff that I listen to. And if I realize that there is, like if I go back and listen to something I've always listened to, I tend to like freak out. I go, oh, I shouldn't be listening to this. I'm contributing to my own demise by listening to this. And I think a lot of people are starting to realize that. There's a friend of a friend who is definitely, um, well, she was kind of in the orbit of this channel. I know she's given up listening to all secular music at this point just because the darkness that you can kind of feel. I wouldn't take it to that extreme yet. Maybe I should. But then what am I going to talk about all day, right? I'm just going to talk about the demise of the music world, which is happening in real time. It is. It's sad between the fact that all the music I enjoy is starting to fade away, that many of these bands going out and performing are mostly embarrassing, not all the time. And I have disagreements with people on this. People say, this band still sounds great. And I'll go and listen to it and I'll be like, great compared to what? Not performing? I mean, I have seen many of these people back in the day, and just nothing is going to compare to that. Sorry. Most of the time. Sometimes, a band will get a new singer and they can carry on. They can just rebuild the band from the ground up and go out there and perform the music. And for a lot of people, that works. But then you've got all the people saying, this isn't the real band. Well, nobody thought about this 40 years ago. What are these guys going to be like in 2024? Well, probably dead, right? They were fully in the rock and roll lifestyle. So, that it doesn't do a lot of good for longevity and for good health. But some people, John Mayall made it to 90, and that's what this was all about. He's not going into the Hall of Fame literally because he's not going to be there, but he'll be inducted posthumously and he'll be given like a secondary award, which is embarrassing. All right. That's all embarrassing. And it's all on this committee which drags their feet and has to be pushed and shoved into a place where people would say, finally, they're going to put them in. I hope the guy lives to actually accept the award. And I think that's what Joe Bonamassa was trying to say in his rant about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. All right. So much for that video. Thanks for watching. God bless everyone. Stay away from the creepy stuff that's going on in the world out there. And that includes going to CVS or Walgreens. And this presidential election thing, you might want to take a break from that for a while because you're going to be told that this new candidate that has been anointed, that she is the smartest person who's ever lived on planet Earth. And she's got the most impeccable credentials. And wow, if you don't get behind her, then you're a very bad person. You're going to be made to feel bad if you don't just go along with what the status quo is telling you to do. So, yeah, thanks for watching. See you soon.